everybody. This is Sławka Kaczmarek. Please welcome Ramona Zabriskie, who's a marriage mentor, multi-award-winning author, and founder of Wife Savers, which is an online course and community for women who want to thrive in their marriage. Hello, Ramona, and thank you for joining us.
Well, hello. So happy to be here.
Thank you very much. So my first question is really simple. How did you become a marriage expert? How come?
Oh, I thought for sure you were going to say, how did you become a wife? I was sure that's what you were going to say. Isn't that funny? A marriage expert. I became a marriage expert by being married.
Right. There's no easy way.
There's a little truth in there. We're all a little more expert than we give ourselves credit for, meaning that all our experience counts for something, even if it's experience that's not as positive as you want it to be. It is experience. You have learned from it. And what I do is I take what people have learned or what they know from their experience, right? And I help them either put that to, I either augment it, but put it into context. And they're like, oh, that's why. We kind of unlock the mysteries is what I do, of why things are the way they are, how you got to where you are, and then how to go where you want to go. And if that means using some of your negative experience to actually propel you in a more positive direction, because you're like, I tell people that all the time. I say, you are in the perfect place. No, like, what? I am not. That's why I come to you. And I'm like, no. You're in the perfect place because you can look backwards and you can see what you don't want or what didn't work, right? And now you look forward, and after you've been working with me and you've gotten a real education, which I believe really the kind of relationship we all really, really want takes an education. And so you got your education. So now you can look forward because now you know how to get what you want. You are in the perfect place. So that's what I do as a mentor, is to really help shape basically someone's perception of where they've come from and help them shape their dreams of where they're going. And I'm the facilitator in the middle between that. That's what I do. And how did I become that? I've been married for almost 43 years, but we were nearly divorced early in our marriage. We filed for divorce. We were separated for 6 months. And we were 4 days away from divorce court when we decided to try again. And that decision rested on me, basically. He was the one who said, can we try again? And I was the one who had to make that decision. And boy, am I glad I decided to go for it. I knew, though, that I was in the perfect place in that moment. I didn't want to go back to the darkness that we had come out of. Knew I didn't want that. And I knew exactly what I did want. And I knew that I'd have to learn how to get there. And so I set out very intentionally as a young wife to learn. Now, the problem was back then, there just wasn't a lot of marriage helps or books. As more and more were published and came forward through the decades, I read voraciously. I was always trying to learn. But in those early days, and it worked so well, I continued to do so throughout our entire marriage, I hung out with women who were more mature than I was, who I admired. Okay, so sometimes they were relatives and sometimes they weren't. But I would just like, you are the kind of woman I want to be. You have the kind of family I want. You have the kind of relationship with your husband I want. I'm thinking this. And so I become their friend and intentionally learn and listen and ask questions. So I credit being an expert, like you that's what you called it. I credit any expertise I have to the successful wives and women that I learned from who were experts. And I really believe that today I'm just a conglomerate of all of those amazing women. They're the real experts. I think successful wives are the experts, not the ones that write the books, not the ones in the counselor's office necessarily. These are women who've really done it, right? They've lived their dreams and love their marriage at the same time. Those are the women that I admire and that I base my whole program off of. And so that's how I got to where I am.
So your story supports this theory you often hear from people that you should hang out with people you admire or you want to become like. Because I remember that when I first heard it, I was a bit reluctant to accept it because I thought, but surely you should be hanging out with all sorts of people. You can't just select your, who you spend your time with, for qualities that you admire. But, the older I get, the more sense I see in that you do become more like people you hang out with. And so, yes, I think.
Including your spouse.
Of course, yes.
You become more and more like all the time, whether you recognize it or not, even if you feel like you're totally different people from the outside. People looking from the outside looking in, say, they can see things in your behaviors, in your facial expressions, and when you, even your way you talk. And think about two old people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully you do know somebody who's been married for decades. They're really old. They start looking alike. Everybody says that. There's a real mystery in there, but yes,
there is something to it. Yes,
you spend time with matters.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And we don't have a lot of time, really. We're all super busy.
Yes.
So yeah, pick people that are going to help you carve or create or formulate, beginning with their example, the kind of life you want. I think that's just wise. Mm-hmm.
So the more happy wives you can surround yourself with, or wise wives, shall we say, you can surround yourself with, the better for you.
Yes. And I found that the reason I even created the work I do today is because I found lots of women didn't have that. They just don't even know anybody to look to as an exemplar or as an advocate or someone to actually teach them. They really, a lot of us don't have that in our lives. We have moms, maybe aunts, even sisters who don't know any more than we know and may have disastrous relationships themselves. So yeah, there was a need.
It's quite tempting if you look around you and you see relationships that are struggling. It's quite tempting to just conclude, well, all relationships are like that, and I shouldn't expect any better. It's just a fact of life. And I remember going through a phase like that myself, looking, even before I was married, just looking around thinking, well, everyone's got problems and they're not coping very well, because that was my surroundings.
That's your experience. Yeah, that's that's who you're surrounded by.
Yeah, so you start thinking the entire world is like that.
No, the entire world is not like that. There's a lot of amazing, what I call grand marriages in the world. These go beyond good and even great. This is grand. These are two people who have agreed, in a sense, to pool their resources, all the best that is in both of them, and accept the imperfection as well. But they just become these tremendously powerful partners. And so I believe that a marriage should be the most powerful partnership in the world, because it has an element that no other partnership in the world has, and that's romance, right? Or love. And with that element, there's just a supercharge to it and a super glue to it. And they're able to accomplish great things together, either in a single dream or in their supporting one another in their individual dreams. So that's Wife Savers 500. that's really advanced sort of skill set, but we learn it. We start with some real basics, and we work our way to understanding how to make that kind of relationship happen. But it's totally possible for anybody in today's world if they really learn their stuff, right? That education we're talking about.
It's certainly more accessible to find resources and to find information than it's ever been. And I'm really grateful for that. Thank God for the internet.
Yes.
in that sense, anyway.
Yes, here we are talking, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I'd like to ask you, if you had to condense your knowledge and experience and give someone just one piece of advice, what would that be and why? What would be the one thing for a person who's married or about to enter a marriage to remember and bear in mind?
John Gottman is the premier researcher into marriage. He's recognized as the ultimate guru because he used the scientific method to really analyze why some marriages succeed and some don't. And he really went through the scientific rigor behind it at the University of Washington, and had a whole project set up that they called the Love Lab that went on for many years. And based on, yeah, and of course included hundreds of couples. So they found this one thing in particular had a, there was just no unquestionable impact on whether couples went on to truly succeed and have a really happy marriage over a long haul. And this is it. It's called turning towards.
Right.
Okay, so what does it sound like? It's just really what it sounds like. When your partner makes a bid for your attention, you give it. That's really what it boils down to. So for instance, if one of you walks in the door after being out or gone, whatever, and says, I'm home, the other says, hey, great, glad you're here. That's not complicated. That's really simple, right? But you'd be amazed how many people don't do that. Either the person who walks in the door doesn't say, hey, I'm home. He just walks in the door, right? And just closes the door and ignores that you're even in the same room. Or, hey, I'm home. And now you're the one coming in. Hey, I'm home, which is turning toward in and of itself, because you're turning toward the spouse that's in the home.
Yes.
And then the person who's at home already could say, okay, that's not turning towards. Just the person who says, oh, I'm so glad you're home, that's turning towards. The message is, I'm here for you, and I'm glad I'm here for you. Right?
Yes.
So a bid for attention can be like anything, like, did you hear about? And you going, I'm in the middle of something right now. But instead of thinking that, you say, no, I didn't hear about that. Hold on, let's talk about that. That's turning towards. I'll never forget, I wrote an article about it because it was so impactful to me, that one night in our bedroom, and this is super common, it isn't like it was an extraordinary situation, it's just a really good illustration of a typical thing. And I was feeling really worried and heavy about something, and I didn't even realize, I kind of let out a sigh. My husband's brushing his teeth in the bathroom next door, and he pops out and he says, what's the matter? That is turning toward. I didn't even know that I sighed, but subconsciously I was letting out my whatever, and it really was a bid for attention. Like, somebody help me. And he was there, just like, bam.
It's amazing.
So that's turning toward. And what the Love Lab Dr. Gottman's Love Lab found out was that, you know, those marriages that succeeded over the long haul were turning toward at least 80% of the time.
Right.
Whereas the marriages that ended up failing within 5 years, no, I think it was within 6 years, were only turning toward 30% of the time. So the more consistently you turn towards one another, the better chance you have in the long haul. So that is a proven thing, and it's so easy.
It's
It is so easy.
Yeah.
It's so simple. And you might be disappointed now that you know that when your spouse doesn't do it for you.
Well, I think I'm right now, I'm sort of going through my day, looking back and thinking how many times I'm just too busy to pay attention to my husband, because I think my husband is actually pretty good at turning towards. But I have a thing where, you know, I get really, really into something. So if I'm thinking or reading, I can't even hear that someone is speaking to me. It's not, obviously, I'm not trying to ignore him, but I often go like, did you say anything? I didn't even know you spoke.
I call that heads down. And
really,
if I know I'm going into a heads down time, I'll warn everybody around me. I'll say, hey, everybody, I'm heads down for the next hour. And that's, in a sense, that's turning towards too, because I'm letting my family or my husband know I'm here for you, but I need you to be here for me for just an hour, instead of just assuming they understand what I need. That's a problem. So turning towards is just sending these constant messages through our actions and our choices that we're cognizant of this other person and that they have value and merit in our life. And so that's all it is, really.
I think it's a very valuable tip, because it's simple and yet it's something you can do so many times throughout the day.
Yes.
I can think of areas where I do it quite consistently, but then there are those areas where I never do it, because I just tend to be distracted at those points, and it's something I could easily improve, I think. So thank you. That's a really useful tip.
There's your magic bullet.
How about the negative side of things? Can you think of, or can you tell us what you think are the biggest mistakes people make in a marriage? I mean, regardless of whether it's men or women, what are the most common mistakes that people make?
I will say that there's a gazillion mistakes.
Which are all are damaging then?
Too many of them, let's say. Not all of them, but too many, maybe the most, originate from a misunderstanding of the fact that this other person is a other person. They're not you.
Really?
They're not an extension of you. Just now, we've been talking about these little pocket-size encounters with each other. Well, when you add them all up, what happens? All those little turning toward moments. Whoa, all of a sudden, we've been married 43 years and we're happy, right? Now take all those teeny tiny pocket-sized moments where you're frustrated that they're not doing what you think they should be doing, or in the way didn't say things when you thought they should be said, or whatever, right? Or not reacting or perceiving things in the way you do. And so teeny tiny all throughout the day now add up. And where are we 43 years from now? Probably not married anymore, or terribly miserable, or, you know, very, very lonely. Let's put it that way. One way or the other, whether you're married or not, you're lonely. So that coming to terms with that is really, really critical. And the earlier in a marriage, the better. Because otherwise our frustration with our other, this other person, starts pushing them away. All right. They get more and more frustrated that they can't make you happy like they used to. We used to make each other happy, right? And those frustrations mount. And I have a whole 10 steps that you can see going both directions. What she's thinking, how it impacts him, what he's thinking, how it impacts her. And it goes like this. If you started out together in the middle, you go boom, boom. There's 10 steps. And at the end is a full-blown alienation. So I call that a dream breaker road, right? And you can actually do an analysis to figure out where you are on this road. Then you can learn the skills you need to turn around. And now there's 10 steps that bring you in closer and closer and closer and closer into center, which would be in our minds unity. But what's unity really? It's oneness and otherness. A oneness in purpose, but an otherness in how that purpose is actually achieved, because you're two different people. And so understanding, for instance, lots of women assume that men or their husband may not be they're not prioritizing home, marriage, and family life in the same way that the wife is. There's not equal emphasis on that. Excuse me. But the reality is he's just as vested. He has the same vision. He wants a peaceful, happy, productive family and marriage and everything, but he's coming at it from a completely different angle. And if you don't understand that, which is a big part of what I do, helping men understand women and women understand men, and as genders and as individuals, if you don't understand that and you don't respect his or her otherness, it's just constant. You will go, it's those little things all day long, every day, they'll push you apart. So that is my answer to your question. What's a major mistake people make? It's a lack of comprehension or a lack of knowledge. Basically, somewhere along the line, we assume a lie that we've been told through movies or books or somehow that we are so much in love that we are just like one. We think alike, we talk alike, we have the same dreams, the same everything, and we are the one special true love.
And we always agree.
So, I have a book, right? I have a book that's the best. It's used probably, I'll bet you it's like a #1 bestseller because so many people buy it, to give to young brides. And it ends up on a bookshelf and gathers dust for at least a year, sometimes up to 7 years before they pull that dusty old book off the bookshelf and go, oh, I need this.
I need help.
Because of that fallacy that they started with, that total misunderstanding. If it doesn't get straightened out, oh my goodness. So that's my answer.
Thank you. So, as you know, most of our listeners are childless Christians, and the experience which I had with my husband that made us aware of how much suffering there is connected to being childless.
I love that word, suffering.
Well, it
encompasses a lot.
I find it very, even though I talk about it a lot, I still find it very difficult to say, because part of me would just like to push it down and never think about it. But because when we got married, which was 8 years ago, we fully expected that we will have children. That was part of our plan. And then it proved difficult and it never happened. And it's kind of like when it first happens, you enter a new world. Like you start discovering there's this whole world that most people thankfully never enter, and they never know about it. They never know what it's like to be in it. But one of the things that we discovered in our journey is that it puts an obvious strain on your relationship, in the sense that even though we're in it as a couple, and this is something to do with what you said earlier about being two different people but pulling in the same direction and having one purpose, is you're trying to have a baby. You obviously mostly agree on that, but then there are so many complications and so many different reactions. Like, for example, especially early on when we were trying to conceive and we didn't really know it would be as difficult as it turned out to be, there's an obvious roller coaster of emotions. So you kind of go up and down a lot. And even though we felt the same emotions, even, we found it very difficult to talk about it. And kind of like when one of us wanted to talk about it, the other didn't. And we spent years kind of not really discussing it properly. I must admit, it was mostly me actually trying to pretend that, this is not really happening. I'm sure it's just a temporary problem and we will be fine. Yes, I'm upset, but it will be fine. So my point is, this is not the only crisis a couple can encounter. It's a pretty big one, but obviously life is difficult and there's always something. If you're not having difficulty conceiving, you will definitely have other problems in your life. It might be financial, might be health. There's plenty. And so what can we do as married people to support one another and communicate better? Because so often you're on the same journey, but you're at different stages. One of you might be further along the way in accepting for example, speaking of childlessness, one may be further along the road accepting that maybe those children will never come. There can be all sorts of disagreements and difficulties expressing, or even realizing your own emotions, but then expressing them. So what can we do to communicate better and to understand one another better?
Right, so there are specific strategies and tactics for hopefully getting the most out of, I need to share some of what's inside of me with you, and then I need you to receive it a certain way and to act on it a certain way, and I need you to be able to express to me what's inside here, and I need to receive it well and deal with it well. That's really deep stuff. That's complicated. As when it comes to especially hot button sort of topics like the one you didn't even want to touch all those years. I don't know what comes first, the relationship or the communication. All right, so when I say the relationship, there's you and there's him, and you're two individuals like we've established, so that's the otherness. But then there's this other entity that is what you are when you're together, and that's the relationship. So that relationship has to be solid and secure and safe before communication can be really, really productive and healthy.
Okay.
But at the same time, how do you create that relationship? Really through communication. So the chicken or the egg,
Right.
It's hard to say, but I do think that both begin with a commitment to your other and to yourself. And those kind of commitments include, I'm not leaving. We never have to worry. We're not going to ever throw that around, right? It's there's commitment. Then like a step above that is faithfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And then a step above that, when we're talking like a grand marriage, is a steadfastness, like this commitment to constancy that just goes way beyond. So that's when we're talking about that very old couple. They're really, really happy. They've developed steadfastness. And so if you're anchored in place with that kind of commitment, then all the storms of life, you know, you're getting blown around, or the wave comes and whoa, you know, and all the circumstances and emotion that are just part of life that you never know what's coming around the bend. It's just like the weather, right? You're cemented there in this spot. And that in itself, that alone will do so much. Then from that, you can radiate out. You can start working out the problems and the difficulties. So it's almost impossible to get through, not just through trials or adversity or opposition, tribulation, problems, whatever you want to call it. It's virtually impossible to navigate that as a couple if you're unsure of each other. You're unsure that the other is as committed to the relationship as you are, or vice versa. Then there's this sense of desperation and nervousness and anxiety and even panic that seeps into all your communication with each other. So we can't have just a calm, you know, expression of what's deep inside our heart if we have any kind of fear that the other is going to leave over this issue. So it isn't just about sinking or swimming together. It's about sinking. It's about doing it in tandem. Like we're gonna, each of us are gonna handle this differently. I understand that we're others, but we are gonna pull together because we're committed. I don't even like that word committed. It's not strong enough to me. We're absolutely cemented in our commitment to the relationship.
So that's the basis.
Yeah.
And on that base, or sort of base, and on the base you can then build, but it will
right.
Be
then we're gonna start, then we can really start doing some communication and real productive, heartfelt communication that is so necessary to processing and getting through trial and tribulation. I just want to say that I have 4 children. I had 2 miscarriages, one when I was 5 months pregnant. That was very traumatic for me. My oldest is severely disabled. My firstborn requires full-time care for everything from showering to toileting to dressing to feeding, right? So she's 40 now. So that's decades and decades of dealing with an ongoing, I don't even know what to call it. Special. It makes my marriage and my family a little special. Special needs is a word lots of people use. So I relate to your story, not because I relate to childlessness, but because I relate to a constant, doesn't go away, just persistent strain on me and my marriage and on my husband that we had to figure out how to pull in tandem on, basically.
Something you wouldn't choose, but you have no control over, in the sense of
right. I had a plan. I had a dream. I had a life dream, a life plan. This is how it was going to be. I was going to get married, and then I was going to this, and then this, and this, and this, and that totally, everything went off the rails.
Yes. whatever you thought would not be that way. It will be different, and you cannot change it. I remember when my father died, having that kind of experience, that no matter what I do, I can't change this one thing that just happened. And it was the same with not having children. I would do anything to change it, but it's not going away, and it's quite a challenge to step over. And what makes it your situation and our situation worse is the persistence, as you say. It's not even an event, it's an ongoing situation. You have to live with it. It's your life now, basically, and you have to,
it's your story.
You just have to figure out how to make the best out of it.
Yes, and that's key, isn't it? That you do go through all the stages of grief. There's no question. And that's when you need your partner more than ever.
Feels more like a vicious circle than stages, to be honest. But yes.
The emotion and the changing emotion, the varying emotion, right? And feel like you're on top of it, and then something happens that triggers, So we go through that whole process, and till we come to what you're talking about, a level of acceptance. But I don't think we're ever really, really happy and thriving until we can get beyond acceptance. And what I call that is making friends with your child. And that's when I don't think you're delivered till then.
Okay.
Like, I want to be delivered from this burden I carry. Well, you may never have the burden removed, but it can feel lighter. You can feel strong enough to carry it. And that only happens when you make friends with it.
Okay.
And that's a sense of, this is my story. And it's not plot B. It's not like a B movie compared to an A movie, that I don't get to live the A movie. Maturity is being able to live with loose ends. Things that aren't ever quite resolved.
Yes.
You live with them. You not only live with them, you make friends with them. Meaning, you're like, I know my story didn't turn out a certain way, but I think my story may be better than the story I thought I was going to live and love. And, I'm actually, I can see the wisdom in this. For this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason, I've grown this way, that way, that way. I've helped this person, that person, that person. And you start to see almost the glory in it, or God's glory in it, that you're being shaped, you're becoming something. Your marriage, your partner, becoming something. For instance, my daughter that I've been telling you about, Ashley, with the severe disabilities, we were in a therapy program for her when she was 2 years old. She's just a toddler, really intense therapy program. And the people who taught us how to do it and supervised us, and they were our go-tos, the experts in the medicals, and they said, your other children are going to be so blessed by this. And at the time, she was like 3 when they told us this. We had a baby who was like 8 months old. And they said, he's going to be so blessed by this. We're like, what? We put so much energy into her. He's not getting a normal childhood, right? And they said, no, you won't believe how he turns out as an adult, because his life experience is like jumping in to save a life, someone drowning every single day. That's the character that's going to come of this. Now, it might not have turned out that way for some children for different reasons, but they were right about our little boy. He is that kind of person today. All of my children are that kind of people today. So in that sense, I have made friends with the fact of Ashley's condition. I can see beauty in it for her, and I can see beauty in it for my own, for her siblings and for myself and everyone else. We've made friends with it. So we don't fight it anymore. We're not sad about it anymore. And that takes time. It takes a lot of time for that kind of soul work to go on. But in the end, I feel released basically from that trial. I still have the burden, but it's light as a feather to me. The consequences roll on, but they're not grievous to be borne, if you will.
I understand that the word maturation is very good, I think, because it implies that you get stronger. Your burden doesn't get lighter, maybe, but you get stronger. Like
That's
if
right.
you give a child a heavy bag, a child will not be able to carry it, but a grown-up will, because obviously you've grown and you're stronger. And I think that the trick is to find ways of growing through it and with it. That is sort of the quest I'm on at the moment. I'd like to know how to grow through it rather than just, sit here and be unhappy. That's my lot in life. I feel like, I'm sure I do believe God has a plan. And at times when I pray and I kind of complain, that, why me? Why us? I do get a sort of slight gentle feedback saying, because that's my plan for you and it's good, and there are good things coming out of it. It's just that you don't know yet. And I obviously dispute that and say, how can this be good? It was supposed, and even if it's good, I wanted it another way. But yes, I can see that growing and becoming stronger is the key.
I do feel bad though that I didn't give you some really specific ways of communicating about it as you're going through that process of maturation.
What about practicalities?
I teach real practicalities down to the point of, this is how to use your face when you say this, right? Let's say you're the wife, like you are, and you're feeling just like you want to burst with emotion. Something's really, really built up, or something's just happened and there you feel just a sudden rush. One way or another, this has got to come out. And it does. For women especially, we're like an underwater, what's the word I'm looking for? Like an underwater natural spring or something, and it has to get, come up and get the dirt out every once in a while to stay clear and free flowing. Otherwise it gets all dammed up with twigs and dirt and whatever. And then it gets really dirty and it gets all backed up. So we gotta get the dirt out a little. And sometimes that process, as necessary as it is to a woman's emotional health, is not very pleasant for a husband. They'd rather not see the dirty water. They really want you to be happy. Husbands, in general, I'm talking about well-intentioned, good guys. They may be irritating. They're definitely imperfect. They can act really immature or whatever, even selfish on occasion or all that. But overall, their intent is good. So that's the kind of guy I'm talking about. So let's assume we have that kind of well-intentioned husband. He really, really wants you to be happy. Then he feels happy because he feels successful. And it's really because there's so much we could go into here, but men are performance-based more than relationship-based. That's a whole bunch of stuff we can delve into in Wife Savers. But because he is so performance-based, he's basing, am I successful or not, which is his whole everything. His whole sense of identity and his worth in the world is all based on, am I successful? So if you're unhappy, it immediately translates into his mind or in his heart, with his soul, whether he really realizes or not. The idea of this feeling like I've done something wrong, I'm not successful, I'm not being a successful husband. And so when you are happy, oh, I'm a successful husband, right? So he really needs you to be happy, and he loves you. He wants you to be happy. So here comes what he considers negative emotion: the crying, the help me, I'm lost, I need you. It's coming up the dirty water, right? You know it's necessary. You can feel it. You can sense it in your womanly soul. I have to get this out to get my clear water running again. And so you can't help yourself. Like, I have to, the dam's going to break. So here it comes. And you perceive it as a step to being healthy. So that makes it healthy in and of itself, right? The letting loose. He does not see it that way. Most men do not have the same brain, and we could go into brain science about this, capacity to process emotion the way you do as a woman. So most men need to release, and I'm talking about physically release emotion rather than process it. They don't process it in the same way quite that we do. Certainly not verbally, not most men. Some do, but most male brains tend towards the less verbalization of emotion. So instead of that, they would release it physically. That's why they've got to do something. They have to take some kind of action, whatever. Whereas a woman, generally speaking, most women, there are other women who are very physically oriented as well, but we're talking about the common tendency to be more
on average.
And so they're going to verbalize their emotion, process that. Now, here we go to this idea of assuming the other person is like you and where you get into trouble. So he's assuming that her negative emotion is a problem and that she's saying he's failing. That's not at all what she's saying. She's saying, I can sense that I have emotion. I'm an emotion creature. It's going to come out. Here it comes. And it's not negative. It's healthy. Just help me get through it, process it, get it out, and it will be healthy. I will then have a better chance of stabilizing, clearing my head, thinking things through. I can't even think right now with so much emotion. And emotion, I think, has just as much value as thinking. I'm not saying that. I believe in emotion. All right. So we have this already, we have a disconnect and a misunderstanding going on. And he feels that negative emotion, the impact of her negative emotion is a problem. It's a negative. She's unhappy. I'm supposed to make her happy. I have to take action. I can feel that emotion. I've got to take action. And so here's a solution. So the solution might be to put you down, to ignore you, to postpone listening to you, to cut you off, or to give you a solution. Well, just why don't you do this? I'm not finished processing. My fount is still spewing dirt. You've got to let it get all the dirt out. And why can't you let me finish this, And he's like, I can't manage, I can't handle it. I am flooded. It's a true term. It's a scientific term for the sensation a man feels, well, any of us can, when we get overwhelmed by emotion, but men, it happens faster. And so they get overwhelmed by the negative emotion and they're flooded. Like when you try to start a car and you accidentally flood it by pumping because you can't get the starter going because it's an old starter or whatever. It floods the car and now it won't turn over at all. So that's how he gets. He gets so flooded, he stops functioning. He walks out of the room. He stonewalls. He gets angry. He's not functioning. He's not thinking creatively anymore. And you've both gone from a little, what should have been a 1 or 2 on the Richter scale earthquake to a 9. And everybody's out of control, right? And it's bad.
Yes, I have a theory, which is, I have no foundation for it apart from just anecdotal. That I've met quite a few women who are childless and who said, my husband always said that he doesn't mind, he would be happy it being just us. And
that's right out of the Bible,
I heard
right? That's Hannah, and right out of the Bible. Her
yes,
saying,
yes, exactly, yes.
am I not worth more than 10 sons?
Exactly. It's obviously not the case for everyone, but I think to a degree it is about, the measure of success being, is my wife happy? If my wife is happy not having children, then I'm happy. But if she's not, then clearly, it's a problem. It's a failure. And I think, a lot of couples go through that kind of process. And I've heard women say, I can't understand, how can he say he would be okay it being just us? But I explain it that way, that it's about, the basic metric being, is my wife happy? Well, if she's happy, then it's okay. And my function in life is to make her happy. I've certainly experienced that and come across it quite often. So
there you go. There you go. And so see, understanding that that's where he's coming from can really help you be more effective in your communication style. So instead of just erupting and then being so frustrated that he can't absorb it and be that partner, the sounding board, not your problem solver necessarily, that you're looking for, just knowing that there's a way to approach it. And it's to go to him and say, he wants to make you happy. So it would make me really happy if you could listen to me for 15 or 20 minutes. You don't have to do anything. I don't want you to solve my problem. I just need you to hear me. I just need you to listen for about 20 minutes. Now, here's key. I started by saying it would make me happy if, and he's like, oh, I can help make her happy. He doesn't, you've told him right away the problem's solved if he'll just do this one thing. And then you tell him very specifically what that one thing is to listen to you. You told him what not to do and what to do. And you gave him an escape hatch. You said 20 minutes. If you think it'll be 30, say 30. Whatever you think it is, you'll be pushing it from 30, oh my God. But if you can do that, and give him a time and then try to really stick to it, chances are he won't be watching the clock. Chances are he'll let you keep right on going. But just telling him that helps him to calm down, because the minute you say, honey, we need to talk, there's something inside of him that goes, he just tenses up all over. My husband does that after 42 years. Hello, why is he doing that? I don't know, but he still has this almost instinctive response to, honey, can we talk?
It's going to be bad.
So instead of that, I wouldn't say, honey, can we talk? I'd say, it would make me happy if I could get out some of my feelings right now, and it really has nothing to do with you solving them, whatever, 20 minutes, whatever it is. And then when he says, well, sure, yeah, you might consider actually walking as you talk together. That will make it a lot easier on him. If you force him to sit across the table from you and look you in the face the whole time, it's just really hard. That's really hard for him. Men are much more comfortable communicating shoulder to shoulder. So if you just hold his hand and go for a walk as you're talking, or maybe even sit next to each other on the couch, and you can of course look at him. You need to look at him. You need that eye contact. So you might do that, but not force him to Like, he doesn't care if he won't sit down and look me in the eye. Oh, it's hard on him. So knowing where he's coming from and what could actually make it a little easier for him to support you, serve you, love you, can go a long, long way. Those are just some really easy tactics. And by the way, when you're done with that conversation, maybe you're not done. Maybe you can say, oh, okay, I know my 20 minutes is up.
But
can we talk again tomorrow night for a few minutes? And he'll say, of course we can. He will. He'll say that, you know, and then you say, thank you. This has helped so much. Thank you. That's all. You express appreciation for that effort that he made, even though he probably was imperfect at it. He may have not been able to resist giving you a solution or whatever. And you're like, I told you not to give me a solution. But if he slips up, he tried. He's learning. He's growing. He's developing. So he tried. And we celebrate what we want more of. So if he tried and he was partially or maybe really an overwhelming success, tell him that you really appreciate it. And there's more of a chance that he'll listen again the next time. And you're going to feel better. And he's going to feel like he succeeded when you say, thank you so much. It helped me feel so much better. He's going to think, I'm a successful husband.
I took two things from you on this specific lesson. I remember it was really helpful for me to realize that I can communicate clearly what I need in that way, saying it would make me happy if you listened to me, or I just need to cry for 10 minutes and blubber. For two reasons. And one of them, partially because it made me more aware of how important it was to say what you need, rather than just assume that if I'm crying, it's obviously because I need to cry, let's say. Rather just say, I need to cry, I don't need a solution just yet. But also it helped me realize, look sort of at myself and realize what's going on with me, because I wasn't even often aware of what my needs were until I had to communicate them. And then I thought, what is actually going on?
Because otherwise you're just kind of aggravated that he's not meeting your needs, but you haven't really even clarified it to yourself.
And the other thing is what you said about what if he comes up with a solution even though you didn't ask for it. I learned to also from you, I learned to appreciate the fact that these solutions keep coming, because at the end of the day, I actually do want the solution at some point. You know, I appreciate the fact that he is relentlessly working on making us happier. I have another question, because obviously when your life becomes something else than you planned, you have to find something new to do instead of what you thought you would be doing. Sometimes it's more obvious, but if you haven't got children, you can just carry on like everybody else. But what you do have is more time, more money, and more freedom, I think. And often I think with us, to a degree, it was like, what do we do with this? Obviously you can do this or that or something else, but you have to choose. And I would like to ask you, what is your advice about dreams? I know you have two very nice concepts in your course. One of them is dream keeping and one of them is dream weaving. I know a lot goes into them, but could you tell us briefly what these concepts are? Because I find them very useful.
Absolutely. So first of all, I think that by the time that's part of this process that we talked, the maturation process that we were talking about earlier, where we're going through the grieving and all the steps in grieving, and we go beyond acceptance to actually making friends with our situation, our story, but then go beyond that. Now we're really into grace. Now we're into the idea of what can this mean? What has this made of me that could be of service to others, right? That is the highest level. That means you've gone through the whole rainbow, and now you're at the pot of gold where God wanted you all along, right? And that's when dreams kick in, and they're new dreams. They're not the dreams you started with, but they're beautiful dreams, and probably better than you would have ever thought for yourself, because they're God's dreams for you. And we can, do all our little scheming in our heads, but God always has a plan that's way beyond what we could ever scheme. So here we are. We got our pot of gold now. We've got our dreams, and these kind of dreams become a compass for us to now, what's the word I want? Kind of summon up all our focus, our concentration, our energy, and really, because there's a lot of it that's been building up over a long time in dealing with this problem. Well, there's a lot of emotional and creative energy that you had planned to spend on parenting. Now it's going to be condensed and through on this new dream. So there's some steps that we go through, that we learn in Lifesavers, which includes dream seeking, because first you got to find it.
Forgot about that one.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then dream believing. Mm-hmm. All right. So you got to really believe in this dream. You have to believe in your own dream or dreams. And your husband, he may have a whole different dream, or you may have one together, a mutual dream. But there's believing is a multi-step questioning kind of thing. Like, am I ready to do this? Am I ready to do that? Am I ready to accept this? I'm ready to accept that. So dream believing is an internal evaluation, analysis of your heart, and if you're really ready to go for this thing, right? When you feel ready to go for it, then you can move on, or he can move on, or you both can move on to the dream itself and executing it. And that's going to be a real journey. That's going to be up and down and back and forth, and sometimes reinventing and all that. So that's what we call dream keeping. For each other, you're kind of keeping the dream in the air, even when there's setbacks. And there are 5 different ways of dream keeping, which we don't have time to go into as well. Then, but the highest evolution in this dream thing is what I call dream weaving. Mm-hmm. And just like you think of a piece of cloth being woven with 2 threads, like this. So you've got him and her, or her and him, whichever way you want to do it. And you're going to weave these 2 people or their dreams together into a solid piece of cloth. And sometimes dream weaving means one person holds taut one thread while the other thread is being propelled across the loom, right? So there is some give and take. But another action that's really important to actually cloth production is bending up the loom, when you got to make both threads equally taut, because if one is too loose or they're both too loose, you end up with too much. You don't have a piece of cloth. There's too many holes in it because the threads aren't equally taut. Mm-hmm. So that's something that has to be worked on and matured through, is where you both become equally engaged. So for instance, you may have your own dream that you're pursuing, but you need his enthusiasm. At least he's got to be just as enthused as you are about it, even though he may not actually be involved in the day-to-day execution of that dream, and vice versa for him. I call his dreams a quest. That's another whole thing too. But you're equally enthused about it and maybe even engaged in it. And then there's the idea of you might have a mutual dream where you're both working at it real hard and mutually engaged in it. And my husband and I have done that through a number of projects throughout our life. And we do it right now with Wife Savers. So that's really possible. And I think that's when the power mode really kicks on high gear for a couple, is when they're working together on the execution of a dream. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can have your individual dreams. So I love that you're bringing this up, because, you know, life is a process, maturation is a process of reinvention, right? We're always reinventing ourselves, incorporating the circumstances and the influences in our life. And it's a process of creation. It should be very, very thrilling and satisfying, actually, in the end, especially for a woman who's a creative creature by nature, to create. What are you going to create of your life?
I think this is such an important concept. And the reason why I love it is because it goes against what we learn about marriage early on, as you say, in songs and movies, because you expect it to be a ready-made thing. You know, you unpack it and it's ready and you use it and it's perfect. And then obviously it's not like that. It's a process that involves two living people who are growing together and working together. And the dream weaving concept really explains it well for me. You know, it shows you that this requires cooperation, and there are times when more strain is put on one person than on the other, and vice versa. And it should involve both people and should involve cooperation. And it doesn't mean that it will always stay in a particular place, but it will grow and create something that you will only see, the effect of which you will only see maybe at the end of your life, or maybe beyond. It will be a ready-made thing which is not ready yet, so you can't see it. And I absolutely love that about dream weaving.
Yes,
and I think it's
I love that you make that point, that we may not fully appreciate this tapestry that's being woven by the two threads till we're way down the road. It requires a great deal of patience. Patience is a bedrock principle of a successful relationship and a successful you.
Thank you very much. My last question is really about Wife Savers. Could you explain to people what Wife Savers really are or is, and you know, what can you expect when you go to wifesavers.org? We will of course include links to both your book and your course below the interview. But tell us, what is it that you do?
If you go to wifesavers.org, you'll see that we have a free ebook called 5 Lies We Tell Brides and 5 Truths That Save Wives. And it's just a little e-guide. So it's a quick, easy read, but it will blow your mind, because there's concepts in there that you may still be under the illusion about from the get-go, from your first step into marriage. You got off on the wrong foot because you believed these things. Mm-hmm. So we kind of bust those open and replace them with the truths that will set you on a more solid ground. So to get a feel for a lot of what we're talking about, that's a really good option to get the free ebook. And my writing is fun, and you'll laugh.
It is. Yes, I confirm.
I'm an award-winning author. I wish I was an award-winning comedian, because I love to make people laugh. So you'll laugh at yourself. You won't be depressed after reading 5 Lies We Tell Brides and 5 Truths That Save Wives. That will also get you onto my email list so that I can send you weekly I send out inspirational stories and thoughts from my own life that and helps. So really concrete helps. I call it the mentor letter. So I'm being your mentor. So you do, that's the first thing to do, I think. And then we also have you'll find at wifesavers.org a link to our Wife Savers podcast. It's what it's called, the Wife Savers podcast. You can also get it on any podcast platform. So if you're an Apple podcast listener, you'll find it there. Wife Savers, one word, Wife Savers podcast. And what makes it fun and unique is that it is my husband and I. So you get to really hear our relationship in real time, and it's totally spontaneous and nothing rehearsed. And we're told it's very, very fun. So we take one question that's submitted by a listener, and we give you an answer in the podcast together. And so it's very entertaining, but very informative. And many people have told me it's absolutely changed their life. So Wife Savers podcast, you'll find links there for that at wifesavers.org. But of course, our real flagship and the thing that will make the real transformation is Wife Savers Course and Community. That's the name of it. Wife Savers Course and Community. And you'll see a little link that says membership, and you can follow through, and that'll take you to the Wife Savers Course and Community. And it is a comprehensive body of lessons and principles that are not anywhere else, meaning nobody has put them all together. So this is, if you want to become your own expert in your own relationship, and actually in all kinds of relationships, including the one you have with yourself, because that's the first thing we do, is learn to appreciate ourselves as individuals and as women. You have all kinds of gifts you don't even know about yet till you come through Wife Savers. I promise. And anyway, so we really put emphasis on you, and then on your marriage, and on your family. You can apply it to your siblings and your parents and anybody. So that's what Wife Savers is. It is a transformative experience that is, like I say, you go through video lessons with me like this, but we also have a community. So the community are women from all over the world, and we're all there for each other. We do live events, lots of live events every week. There's a way to learn and get support in live time. So that makes it very different from just kind of some kind of e-course. You also learn very quickly that I'm a real person. So I talk personally with my students. I'm very involved, and they all talk personally with each other a lot. And it's very, very much a community. And I have a whole team that helps make all of it happen as well. So it's a beautiful place to be, and a very unique place to be. Nothing else like it on the planet.
Yes, it's the online community aspect of it is something I really appreciate, because I feel as a Wife Savers member, I can talk to women from all over the world, and I'm learning more as a result, because I'm not constantly looking at my own relationship, my own situation exclusively, but I'm actually listening to people's stories, and they're obviously very versatile, very varied, and I feel like I've learned a lot from that, and I've gained friends. So that's
I'm so
beautiful.
Glad we
beautiful
call each other sisters. Yes.
Yes, it feels like that. Yes.
I think it could be particularly enjoyable and beneficial to a woman who is not having children or not expecting to have children, that you're able still to have this creative outlet, which is your marriage.
Yes.
You're growing a person, your husband. You're growing yourself
and yourself, yeah.
And you're growing this relationship, and it can become something absolutely stellar, way beyond your imagination. And that process of learning, applying, creating can be very thrilling, very satisfying.
I certainly find it very, very useful and helpful. And as you said before, it made me aware that my relationship with my husband is not sort of standalone, but that we are a part of a bigger picture. And I really took a step back and looked at myself, how I treat myself and how I relate to other people around me, which was very unexpected because I came to Wife Savers wanting to, work on my marriage and make it even better. And then suddenly I was improving relationships which seemed very sort of unrelated to, let's say, unrelated to my marriage, but they mattered. It's all part of a bigger picture, and that was a real surprise, and also a big pleasure of joining Wife Savers. Thank you very much for joining us, for your advice and mentorship. I really appreciate it, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.